this is the most buzz I've heard from a high school recruiting with the wide receiver position. Joshua Moore's one that I think they feel like they have a pretty strong shot with, and then certainly Dalen McClutchin, who I feel like sneakily, even though it's surprising to people because he's from Texas, I think FSU leads there personally. I think they're at a good spot, but that wide receiver position, kind of how you feeling about that, Josh?
I don't know how I feel about them recruiting another wide receiver named Joshua Moore. After all that we went through, like, what was it, 6 or 7 years ago, with the Joshua Moore out of Texas, who did he end up signing with A&M or?
I don't know, but I knew he didn't stay there.
He didn't stay anywhere. So anyway, I when I saw the Joshua Moore, I had to do a double take. But yeah, he's real explosive. And then I'll hit on a couple guys that we talked to here at the On3 Elite Series, and you got to start with Vernell Brown III. First of all, Vernell Brown, one of the most impressive young men that I was able to speak to here in Nashville. His father played for the Gators, had his time in the NFL, and you can just tell that it almost feels like he's been through this before. Vernell Brown, incredible athlete. Sounds like they're going to have to weather the storm of this weekend with Ohio State. And I think they will. I think Ohio State has slipped a little bit with Vernell Brown. It's basically Ohio State versus the state of Florida, Miami, UF, and FSU. And I like where FSU sits right now in terms of the teams in state that have a shot at Vernell Brown. But I think Ohio State, big challenge this weekend with him being on campus for an official visit. But I don't think he makes any decision until July. So we know FSU is going to get their crack at him. Then we move on to Khalil Lockett, 5-star wide receiver out of Texas. He told me specifically, do not sleep on FSU. I said, are they kind of on the outside looking in of these top 3 schools, Texas A&M, and Oregon? And he said, no. He goes, I got 4 at the top, and FSU's in that 4. I got 4 leaders. So he says FSU's in there. I think he's going to be a really tough pull out of Saxe, Texas. Because, with Texas and Texas A&M both just willing to do anything to get him. LSU's heavily involved. You got Oregon trying to get in there. Khalil Lockett, while I think he genuinely enjoys being around Ron Dugans and Mike Norvell, I think he's going to be a really tough pull, but it's doable. Who else was there? Are you a little surprised that that FSU's completely out of it for French?
Yeah, I that one's kind of weird. It's like ever since he went to Ohio State, FSU's kind of like, you know what? I don't want to pinpoint a kid, but for FSU with their targets, they're really big on, and the NIL is a big part of what they do. They know Battle Zen does a really good job, but if you're NIL centric, where that's the main focus, they seem to tater away from those guys. And I'm not saying he's that way, but the way he talked about NIL kind of makes you believe it's a high priority to him.
Yeah, it's interesting because Tramel Jones is recruiting Vernell Brown. I mean, I'm sure he's in Jamie French's ear, don't get me wrong. But Vernell Brown told me when I asked him, who's recruiting you the hardest to Florida State, he mentioned Tramel Jones. So I thought that was interesting.
Another interesting one with Vernell Brown is his old quarterback, Trevor Jackson, is also now at FSU.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And Vernell Brown, he's going to punch his own ticket wherever he wants to go. But I really think, like, of the top elite wide receivers in the state, I'd probably circle Vernell Brown if I was an FSU fan to be like, I think that's the guy in state that we really need to go get.
Yeah, and I think people are surprised kind of where they sit because they don't understand FSU's been on this kid for like 2.5 years. Like that relationship is really deep with FSU. It's not just Dugans and Norvell. It's like he's been around the program. He's sold on I think their product. This is one of those, Josh, I think the product really sells FSU to really put them in the position that they're in.
I think so too. And I just think when it comes to Lockett, though, he'd have to fly over Texas and LSU to get to FSU. And, sometimes it just doesn't work out. But that being said, the season will provide FSU with another opportunity to land an elite wide receiver. And I talked to some of these guys about that as well. Like, you're making your decision during the season, or during the summer, but don't you want to see what happens during the season? And none of them were like, no, I don't care. They were all kind of like, yeah. So even if some of these names come off the board, if Florida State goes out and does what we think they can do this season on the field, they'll have a chance to circle back on some of these big names.
Yeah, and that's a juggling dynamic because, we talked about the outset. There's going to be a lot of commits in the summer, but there's also going to be a lot of decommits during the season because kids are going to want to see schools, and say FSU wins 10 or 11 games, or this school struggles or this school struggles, that they're going to back off probably how they're feeling.
Yeah,
So you have
coaching
that.
changes. Hey,
Yeah.
one thing we know about Mike Norvell, he ain't going nowhere. So
Yeah.
they're going to have an opportunity when all the coaching carousel starts spinning. They're going to have an opportunity to, pick up some scraps that fall to the wayside there as well. So Florida State sitting in a great spot, despite only having 4 commitments, despite, and hey, I get it. You're like, wow, Florida State's not even top 10 coming off an undefeated regular season. How is this happening?
Yeah.
But if you understand recruiting, you understand the elite guys just don't commit on a whim. They're here to set a decision date. They want to commit live on the On3 YouTube channel. Like they're just not doing it. Like you don't have a 5-star just commit on a visit. Just tell the coach, hey, I'm committed, and walk out and announce it. Like that just doesn't happen anymore. You got to be a little bit more patient, and Florida State's time's coming.
Yeah. So we talked about the offense. We mentioned some of those guys. Defense, especially edge for me. I think that's a big deal. Zion Grady's one that I circle. That's really high. Javion Hillison. I do feel while he's taking visits, I do feel there's a strong comfort of how FSU feels of securing that one. They do get him in on the tour.
I just think he's going to Texas, right? He's going to Texas.
He is going to several places, so
that's going to be a wild one. They're going to have to hold on tight.
Yeah, they will have to hold on tight, but I know from just people but the point is there's several edge guys. I feel like edge is really important, and then you also have linebacker we already covered with Tavion Wallace. Gavin Nix even told me some interesting things when I've talked to him that he likes the stability with FSU. That's not something I've heard about kids with FSU, but I guess give your thoughts on the defensive side of the ball real quick, Josh, on kind of where they sit.
Well, I think it's been a while since Florida State's had the stability. I mean, even after Jimbo left, Willie was not here long enough for them to establish any stability. And then Mike comes in 2020. Things get off to a rough start. You don't know which way it's headed after the second year, really. And now you get a sense of like, 1, Mike Norvell's not going anywhere. 2, he keeps his staff together. You kind of know what's happening there. And he's been adding upgrades, like you guys mentioned. Pat Surtain has been a great upgrade for not only the DB position, but just Florida State's ties to the state of Florida and the relationships that he has all around the South. Like you said, they need a great pass rusher. Who's it going to be? Well, they got one in Javion Hillison, like you said, but Bama's still coming. I think I'd be a little bit concerned about Texas. I'm not exactly sure what weekend he's going to go out to Texas, but that's one you want to keep an eye on. And like you said, I love Zion Grady. I think Zion Grady, when he decommitted from Alabama, the first 2 teams I thought about were Florida State and Georgia. I think Miami now is a major threat. But he's going to be a tough pull. I mean, if Georgia wants him, that's going to be a tough one. So I think right now, with where they sit with Tavion Wallace, that could be huge because that comes in at a major position in need. Takes a little bit of pressure off Randy Shannon if he can get a guy like that in the boat early. And look, I think that this run of official visits is really going to set the tone for where the defensive board sits.
Yeah. Matt, your thoughts on maybe some of the defensive players you feel like where they stand?
I mean, I think first you got to look at Jalen Wiggins, too, from just down the road at Rickards High School, who's been kind of obviously committed to UF, but it seems a little shaky right now. Even when he committed to UF, and then he visited Florida State the next weekend, I remember talking to him, and it was just like, this kid doesn't seem committed at all. Like, he's talking about taking visits to Stanford, UCF, everywhere. Like, he wanted to go around the globe, it seemed like. But
yeah. Those visits are starting to stack up too.
Yeah,
like it's not just a one-off to FSU. They're starting to stack up, and you're starting to say like, well, if you're committed to Florida, why are you at Florida State almost every other weekend? And
exactly,
that's going to be a big battle. And I think we know Florida is going to give Florida State a run during the summer. It's just you got to be a little bit patient. You got to see what Billy Napier is going to put out on the field this year, because there could be a major opportunity to come after some of those Florida recruits if things don't get off to a good start in Gainesville.
Yeah, and that's the thing too that I think Jalen kind of is thinking about, not just the FSU stuff where the personal relationship starting to really get strong, but just these guys might not be here. These guys, Florida staff might not be here if they struggle and have another year like they had
In the
last year.
Florida State, Florida State recruits were hearing those whispers after year 2 of Mike Norvell. Like,
Yep.
is this going to work? Do you really, Mike might make it one more year, but is Mike going to be there all 4 of your years? That was something that could be used against him on the recruiting trail. So that's not uncommon. I mean, it's not like you're doing an amazing job of connecting the dots there. Everybody in the world's talking about it, but it's a reality. If you are one of those recruits sitting in that seat, you got to really think, like, is this coach going to be here when I get done? And that's why all this FSU stability talk is kind of taking that off the board when it comes to negative recruiting FSU.
Last thing for me, Josh, and it's kind of a two-parter, do you think FSU one is ever going to be top 5 recruiting in high school? And then second for me, what's kind of next for them of what they need to, I guess, accomplish in recruiting? What do they need to do that maybe they're not doing as strongly that really takes them to, like, say, national title contender every year?
Well, one, do I think they're going to be a top 5 contender every year? No, but I do think that they're going to be able to jump up there. Like right now, we see Notre Dame in the top 5. Notre Dame usually finishes outside the top 10, but they're having a really good year recruiting, and they're going to jump up and maybe make a run top 5, top 3 this year. So I could see Florida State being like that, but like I just see from a national perspective what Texas and Oregon and Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee, kind of the resources and what they have on the recruiting trail. Not to say that FSU's way below that. If we're talking tier 1, Florida State's maybe tier 1A, 1B. I mean, they have a lot. They just don't have everything that they need. So I do think that they are a major threat on the recruiting trail. But are they a perennial top 5 team? Probably not. And that has to do also with Mike Norvell's strategy of how he utilizes the transfer portal. Look, there's different ways to win. I mean, if you're a head coach, coaching like Nick Saban isn't the only way to win a national championship. There's different coaching styles that also work. Does Nick Saban's style work really well for Alabama at the time? Yes. But Mike Norvell, look at Michigan. Michigan didn't have top 15, top 10 classes leading up to their national championship. They just did it their way, a little bit different. They still try to recruit the high school level pretty hard. And I think Mike Norvell and FSU are going to find that balance. And if that means not necessarily being a top 5 team every year, that's okay. But they're going to make noise on the recruiting trail in high school, and they're going to make noise in the transfer portal. So you add those two things up, and at the end of the day, this is really about talent acquisition. And the ways that you can acquire talent now have changed. And I think that Mike Norvell and FSU do a good job of kind of balancing that out. And I think fans are going to catch on to the fact that, hey, we need to do good at the high school level. We're going to do great sometimes, but we're going to be in that good to great range.
Is there anything they're missing that you feel like they could do a little better, Josh? I think it's more just keep doing what you're doing. But just your take on if there's anything they're kind of missing.
I don't think they're really missing anything because every year we've seen the roster get better.
Yeah.
So if the roster continues to get better, why, yes, you want to see that infusion of high school talent. And I think they'll get better and better at the high school level with more continuity and more wins. We've seen that happen as well. But every team has like reading message boards all around the country, like Florida State. Can we ever recruit linebacker? Can we recruit a decent O lineman? Like you go to any message board and every team has that 1 or 2 positions that they feel that they cannot recruit. And I mean, like if you go to the Georgia board, if you go to the Alabama board, they're complaining about a specific position. So FSU, of course, they have kind of their areas of concern as well, but give them time. And I think that this strategy that Mike Norvell's using of balancing the high school level with the transfer portal is working for them.
Is it just product, or is it something else that Mike has? Because we talked about this at the beginning. Mike is a lot different, and we're around him a lot. So everything you guys see and hear, that's exactly how he is all the time. But is there something unique about the program now that because we hear a lot from recruits like Mike's different. He's not even almost like not a head coach, but is there something they're doing or is it just what we see, relationships and winning?
Well, no, a lot of it is that, but I think a lot of it is Mike Norvell's strategy and having talked to coaches that are currently in the Moore Center or have been working in the Moore Center previously. The things that they tell me about Mike is that he's like, everything's so well thought out. Every hire he makes, and there's guys there that are there for certain reasons. And I'm not saying like Norvell has a blind spot to some things, but there's reasons why JP is where JP is on the staff. Yeah. There's reasons why Randy Shannon's there. You know, when Randy Shannon was off field, him and Adam Fuller were essentially co-DCs, even though Randy Shannon was off the field. I understood when he got that promotion, like I knew he was going to get that promotion because of what I was being told of his role and how important he was to that defense. So while a lot of the fans, especially the fans watching these Warchant shows, focus so much on recruiting, there's other reasons Mike Norvell has guys in place, not just recruiting. I mean, recruiting is a big part of it, obviously, but he looks at things differently and he configures that staff for certain reasons. And you know, you just got to trust it because he's done it and he's done it well. And every year it feels like he's improved, whether it's recruiting rankings, the coaching staff, the on-field record, which matters the most. He's improved that every year over year. So, I mean, he's doing something right.
Right. Matt, final thoughts on just, you know, kind of some of those things where, whether it be, is there a missing piece that they could do better, or is what is kind of their secret to success that you've seen behind the scenes when people you've talked to?
I mean, I don't think there's anything missing. I agree with Josh 100%. Like, you do it the way you want to do it. And Norvell's always been, it's my way. We're going to do it this way, and we're all going to do it together, right? It's just the way Florida State is and the way Mike Norvell is. There's nothing really missing. Again, you can go get those missing pieces in the portal and fill them in. They've been really good at that. So it's fine. Like, a Kittle flip, that happens to everyone. I know Florida State fans love to be like, oh, it doesn't matter until we get to signing day because KJ Bolden and all that stuff. But like it happens, and you can just get a new safety in the portal. Like, they got Earl Little's not safety, but they got Earl Little, who's also really good. But you just plug in where you can. I think they're doing a really good job of that.
Yeah, right. They're acquiring talent by any means necessary.
Yep.
Josh, I know you were on this beat before, but this season we talked about this in the beginning. You know, a team that could, you know, be a national title contender, but how do you kind of envision this season going? Because I think they have a lot of great scheduling favoring their way. Obviously, I look at that Notre Dame game and I'm like, whew, that's going to be tough at 7:30 at night at Notre Dame. But how are you feeling about this FSU team?
This is a playoff team. I mean, there's no question about it. This is a playoff team. The path relative to other teams, their path to being a playoff team is not that hard. I think that's the goal. You know, they'd be if this was last year, they would have definitely made the playoffs. So having everything I heard, you know, and you got to think how far they've come. You know, you were saying something earlier, like they've come, go look at the class that they brought in when Mike Norvell arrived. Mm-hmm. That was not Mike Norvell's doing. I mean, that's just kind of where the program stood. That was what the program could attract just 4.5 years ago. Now you look at what the program can attract. And if you just blinked your eyes, you'd be like, how did that happen? And it was this consistent, slow climb, dare I say, that Mike Norvell's been on since he's been here. And it's just, hey, you can now connect these data points and actually see the trend. Whereas I know it was a little hard to see in year 1 and 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, this is a lot of fun, man. I love chatting it up with Josh.
Yeah, I love talking FSU on here with you guys.
Always fun. Josh is sporting the awesome helmet there, but appreciate Matt LaSerre jumping on, and then we appreciate Josh coming on. So for all these guys, I'm Michael Langston, warchant.com. We'll see you next time for another Recruiting Roundtable.